Namaste and welcome to Pramanic Astrology channel. And I want to I want you to introduce to James Braha. I thank you, James, for coming here and sharing your insights with us. And
My
in
pleasure.
your busy schedule, you come here. I really appreciate it, and we are really looking forward to the guidance and the
Okay.
message you want to share with all of us. Okay, so those who James needs no introduction, but those who are new into Vedic astrology and want to learn astrology, he is one of the astrologer who is a bridge between Western astrology and East astrology. So those friends from the Western side, they should definitely check out his work, and those from India and Vedic background, they should also check out his work. And now, if you have any questions about what he wants to share, you can ask them at the end of it. We will have a separate session about it at the end of this. And first, we will listen to his message. Okay. So over to you, James.
Okay.
And he's going to share some of the sutras from his new book. I want to talk about that. I'm looking forward to that book and want to know more about it. But it's over to you, James.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose that a lot of your viewers have seen my other videos, and they know me from Facebook. I'm working on the. Sorry, I finished the book, the Braha Sutras,
Right.
and I thought that it would be as an ebook for Indians a week ago, but it's
Hmm.
been delayed and delayed. I just gave it to them yesterday. Should be
Right.
Today's April 5th. Should be in the next 3 or 4 days. It'll be an ebook in India, and that'll be that. It's Yeah.
Oh.
It's been out for about a month in America.
Ebook as in Kindle.
Not Kindle, but an ebook. It'll be from
As
Google
an
Play.
ebook. Okay. Okay.
Go to
Okay.
Google
Okay.
Play.
Got
They'll
it.
get an ebook. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's harder getting the hard copy into India.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked on that book for a year, and it basically is everything that I've learned during my lifetime. I had written my first book, Ancient Hindu Astrology, for the
Right.
Modern Western Astrologer. I had written that in 1986. It came out, and I remember at the end, at the end of the book, I mean, I was trying to get Westerners to learn Jyotish and use it alongside with Western. Now, for the last 5, 10 years, I'm trying to get the Westerners that are only using Jyotish to also learn Western, and they don't want to. They don't know enough of this one. And I've said it 100 times, you're never going to master any system. You're going to get the basics, and then you should move over and get the basics of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, use both systems, etc. So I will talk about some sutras, but I'm also going to talk today about something that I have avoided speaking about for a long time publicly. I I occasionally would speak about nakshatras, lunar mansions, and occasionally hosts would edit out what I said about nakshatras because they didn't agree with their view of them. So today, I mean, when I was writing this book, the Braha Sutras, I started writing about nakshatras. I believe that they're being completely misused in the last 20 years, 25 years. Mainly, I have to say, it's mainly Westerners started to write about nakshatras, and they started writing long essays on them. And now on the internet, you have people just reading the horoscope through nakshatras. This is completely alien to Jyotish. And the Indians didn't start it. The Westerners started promoting nakshatras as being everything. So I'm going to try to clarify what I think nakshatras are and why both of my teachers in 1982 and 1984, I was so excited. There were two things that I wanted when I went to India. I didn't even know, I really didn't have that much hope that I would learn Jyotish because I had seen the books, and written in English, they were pretty useless. But I said, if I find a teacher, I want the astrological mantras, and I want to know about these nakshatras that I had read about a little bit. And both in 1982 and 1984, I was massively disappointed because both teachers said, no, don't bother with nakshatras. They are from thousands of years ago. That's not the system of Jyotish. I was disappointed by that, but I understood. So the nakshatras are basically archetypes. They are not the same as planets. They are not the same as houses. They are the planets and the houses relate to a person. The Mercury is your intellect. Venus is your love life. The nakshatras are not like that. They are archetypes, and they are used very well for muhurtas. They are used for picking times for religious rituals. They are used to see whether or not you would have compatibility. The nakshatras there are some nakshatras that are considered human, some are devas, and some are rakshasas, and it depends on the compatibility there. That's really what they're used for more than anything. They're more religious than they are astrological. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But first I want to say a couple of things about what's going on in the world today. So I wrote a sutra about Pluto transiting Capricorn, which started right around the time of the assault on the United States Capitol, 2020. Anyway, we are seeing Pluto, which is domineering and aggressive and warlike. Pluto rules nuclear power. It rules mafia. It rules criminals, the underworld. It's very aggressive and very pushy. It's the higher octave of Mars. And it has now, in the tropical system, not the sidereal, in the tropical system, it has entered Capricorn. And you're seeing dictators all over the world. The politics are getting far right. They're getting autocratic. And this, I believe, is Pluto going through Capricorn. And it will cause upheaval. Pluto is a planet of, it's like popping a boil. It's like a explosion. It's like a volcano. But then when you're done, it cleanses everything. But right now we're in the very difficult part of it. And it's possible that when Pluto goes into Capricorn in the sidereal system, the system the Vedic uses, we'll see another explosion of activity in this realm, or it may be the purification finally of it, fixing itself. But the reason I'm mentioning this right now is because, Pluto is not government, but Pluto is the establishment. So the establishment is going through a big upheaval. And the economic situation is, in my opinion, getting very, very, very close to the end game, to the point where, all the countries have massive debts. They're all financially unstable. There's almost no more free markets. And the way free markets work, the way capitalism works, is that you have these boom times when the economy is getting better and better and people are getting richer and richer, and then it collapses. Okay, then it collapses. And then once it collapses, it cleans out all of the garbage, all of the economic fraud and all the economic, dislocations. It cleans them out. Everybody suffers for a year or two, 3 at the most, and then the system begins to build up again. But the governments have figured out how to stall, how to stop the cleanouts. And they've been doing this for 20, 30 years. And every time that they stop the cleanout from occurring, it makes the system weaker and weaker and weaker. And when 2008 occurred, they almost didn't make it. They almost didn't make it, but they patched it up with a couple $1 trillion or whatever, and they saved the system. But every time they do that, it makes the next one worse. So the next one is not fixable in the ordinary sense. So we're going to go through the real cleanup. So I just think that people should be as much as they possibly can, if they have extra cash, they should buy some gold and some silver. Gold is very expensive for the common person. They buy silver. For the wealthy people, they should buy gold. Also, there's a guy that I know who deals in gold and silver, and he said in the last 12 months, he has never had so many people come to him and say, David, I have $1 million in the bank. I know I've got to get it out. David, I've got $2 million in the bank. I know I've got to get it out. So they're trying to get their money out of the banks and put them into real estate, gold, silver, business, anything other than in the banks. So anyway, so if you have extra money, I would say to buy some gold and silver, etc. Next thing I want to say is that I was talking about how backwards it's become. Now I have to try to get Westerners that are studying Jyotish to learn the Western system, and now, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So now, years ago, I used to say, look, it's great to read the astrology books. You've got to read the astrology books to get the basics, but you also need to have a teacher. You need to hear, it's an oral tradition, right? Now the opposite is occurring. I get clients all the time, and I say, so do you study astrology? They say, yes. I say, do you have my book? No. Do you have any books? No. Where do you get it? I get it from the internet. So now we have to, it's backwards. So people that are getting all their knowledge on the internet, the problem with it, it's not such a problem if you have one good teacher, but what you have is a big variety with a lot of different opinions, and that becomes problematic. People, it's an interesting thing. I've been talking about the sutras for the last year. I've practically spoken about every sutra in the book, and yet there's a difference between hearing it and there's a difference between reading it. I had one guy, not too many people have gotten the book yet because it just came out a month ago, but some people have gotten it. And one guy put on my Facebook post, he said, my practice is going to be massively altered by what you wrote in this book. You've saved me years and years of struggling and trying to figure out this and figure out, because I've been in it 40 years. But it's an interesting thing because I've spoken almost all the sutras on, but you've got to read them slowly and then apply them. Like one of the proofreaders, they said, well, it's going slow because every time I read the book, I find something new and I want to apply it to my chart and their chart, et cetera, et cetera. So the books, if you're serious about this, you've got to get a couple of books that really explain everything, and you can listen to the YouTubes, but just listening to the YouTubes, you're going to go astray. Okay, so I went to India, and it was a 12-week stay. 2 weeks before I was going to leave, I had not found a teacher. I had found astrologers, but nobody good. 2 weeks before I left, suddenly I found Santanam. I went to the bookstore. I was buying all the classics. The guy said, why are you buying classics? I said, I want to learn this. He said, you can't learn it from books, but I have someone for you. So he sends me to Santanam. Now, here's what I want you to know about my teachers, okay? I had two teachers. One is Santanam, who was a scholar who was becoming famous at the time that I met him. The other is Padya, who is a practicing astrologer who's extremely good. Santanam, when I asked about nakshatras, said, forget it, they are lost. They are lost. Okay, so Santanam was not a guy. We have a phrase in America, he's not a guy in a diner. In a diner, in a restaurant, everybody's got an opinion. Santanam was not a guy with an opinion. Santanam was a guy who had translated 8 classical texts. He had translated Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, Saravali, Gargahora. He had translated 8 texts, okay? If you think that I wanted the knowledge of nakshatras, what do you think Santanam wanted when he heard about it? Okay. Now, just to tell you who Santanam was, and he was a young man. I was 30, he was 35, maybe 38. So he was young. But this guy, all he did in life was astrology. He lived and breathed astrology. If he could have found the nakshatras, he would have. When I was leaving Santanam, I had been with him for 6 weeks. I extended my visa. I stayed with him for 6 weeks. He taught me all the basics. I was so grateful. And I said to him, is there anything I can get you from America? Anything. And I held my breath because I thought he's going to ask for a computer. They were just coming out, or a watch, or a television. He's going to ask something expensive. No. He asked for a copy of Al-Biruni's book, The Elements of Astrology. Wow. And it took me 4 years to find it, and I found it. It was a pamphlet that they Xeroxed, and I sent it to him. That's what he wanted. If he could have found the nakshatras, he would have. Then 2 years later, when I went to Padya, he said, no, forget it. It's gone. Okay, so how has it become so big? Have you noticed that the internet has the ability to spread all kinds of knowledge and all kinds of falsehoods? So even, I found some books on nakshatras by Indians, and I tried to use them, and they were unusable. It was very, very general. You could read any nakshatra to anybody. It was not specific. The nakshatras are religious. They are about religion. The nakshatras, first of all, the people that go to look for the knowledge of nakshatras, they go to the Vedas, they go to the Purāṇas, and they go to the astrology, okay? It's mostly the knowledge of nakshatras, or not even the knowledge, but what little is written. They have told me that what little is written about the nakshatras, you can fill in 2 pages. Listen to this clearly, okay? The information on the nakshatras, you can fit. Now there's 27. If there were 2 nakshatras, then you'd have a page on each one. No, there's 27 nakshatras, and the information that you can find on them fits about 2 pages. Now, by now, some students might be freaking out and saying, but I'm using this. But now, I will grant you one thing. I will grant you this. Anybody can use anything to make predictions and be psychic. When I was a little boy, my mother used to tell me stories of psychics. They would get a cup of Turkish coffee. My parents were Syrian Jews. They would drink the Turkish coffee, turn the cup over, and the coffee grounds would be on the plate. And the psychic would look at the coffee grounds and tell you your future from the coffee grounds. And I'm not saying that they were frauds. They weren't frauds. They were psychic. It's possible that you can use nakshatras psychically, but astrologically, no. They are not Jyotish. They are not astrological. Now, I don't know how many of your watchers are serious astrologers, but anybody who's a serious astrologer has gone to the classic text, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. This is the Bible of astrology. It's basically, there's a few books, but Parashara, the name of the system that we use when we're studying astrology is Parashara. There's another system called Jaimini, but Jaimini is not as good, so it's not used as much. Some people can use it very well, but it's not as popular. Parashara is the guru. Parashara was the sage that gave us astrology. Go to Brihat Parashara Horasara Shastra and see what you find on nakshatras. Just about nothing. Just about nothing. There'll be some little mentions here and there that will have nothing to do with a person's life. Now, in that same book, you'll find chapter upon chapter upon chapter on yogas, on planets in houses, on dashas and bhuktis. Everything is there. Gee, did Parashara get sick on the day he meant to write about the nakshatras? No. The nakshatras are religious. They come from the Purāṇas, they come from the Vedas, they have to do with when to start rituals. And they are archetypes. There's the planets and the houses, which are symbolic, and they are very specific. And there's the archetypes, which are gods. So each nakshatra has a presiding deity. Each nakshatra has a presiding deity. Okay, and that's Shravana. The deity for Shravana is Vishnu. The deity for Satabhish is Varuna. The deity from Parani is Yama. I can't
Yamraj. Yes, yes.
So these are archetypes. And the thing about these archetypes is that archetypes exist for everybody. So, in other words, in the horoscope, there's these 27 nakshatras, these 27 lunar mansions. Everybody has every nakshatra in, even though there's 27 of them, and even though you don't have planets sitting in Satabhish or sitting in Jeshta, the archetype is part of our existence. It's the whole horoscope, and we all relate to all of the nakshatras. This is the reason why, if you go to 10 people, you pick any random nakshatra and you read it to the person, and they're going to say 7 or 8, at least 7 or 8 will say, oh yes, that fits me, because they have that nakshatra within their existence, because the nakshatras are gods. Shiva, Vishnu, Saraswati, the entire world, whether they are of the Hindu religion or not, the entire world are affected by Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Saraswati, Trimurti. We're all affected by them. We have them all. Now, there is one astrological text. It came after Brihat Parashara Horashastra. It is called Brihat Jataka. Brihat Jataka is the only astrological, I'm not saying religious, they have religious texts where they talk about these, and they fill about 2 pages. And then they have the Brihat Jataka, which all the astrologers quote from Brihat Jataka. So, in Brihat Jataka, it tells the meanings of the nakshatras, all 27 of them. It takes up 3 pages, and the explanations take up, there are 27 nakshatras, and the text takes up approximately 300 words. 300 words. In other words, there's 27 nakshatras, and I'll give you an example. Listen for the 10 to 12 words, which is the explanation in the only ancient astrological text that describes nakshatras for people. Listen carefully. I'll give you 2 or 3 of them. You can count them. Kritika. Now, this is the moon in Kritika. Glutton, fond of wives of other men, of bright appearance, and of widespread fame. That's about 10 words for Kritika. Uttara Palguni, generally liked, will earn money by his learning, and will live in comfort. Purva Ashada, will have an agreeable wife, will be proud and attached to friends. So before you even consider how it works, and they say it works, and I can see how it works, consider what the ancients said about these. They said almost nothing. What they did say was religious in the Purāṇas and the Vedas. And in the one astrological text, you get about 10 words. Now imagine saying to a client, okay, I'm going to do your horoscope. We'll wear clothes and flowers of various colors and have beautiful eyes and limbs. That's you. Chitra, that's you. Shravana, will be prosperous and learned, will have a liberal-minded wife, will be rich and of widespread fame. So now we have an entire generation taking a tiny, tiny little piece of almost nothing and making it into a large science. Now you have two possibilities. This is either evolved people in the year 2000 to 2022 have gotten so evolved that they have been able to take these little symbols and expound on them and make them fantastic. Or you have the corruption of an entire body of knowledge. Now I have another fact. So what I've given you there were some facts to ponder. The other fact I'd like you to ponder is that in the one astrological text from the ancients that we have, in the one with the 10 words, the only explanation he gives is for the moon. But now we take the nakshatra for the ascendant. We take the nakshatra for the sun. We take the nakshatra for the moon. This is great, right? It has no basis. It has no basis in anything. Now, if you... Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to say. The nakshatras are great to find out whether you're compatible. If you're a human, if your moon nakshatra is human, and the wife is a rakshasa, it might not work, this like that. And then the muhurtas, when to do religious rituals. There's one other thing that I can say from a little bit of experience appears to work, and that is that certain planets seem not to work very well in certain nakshatras. I will say that. Planets when I've seen Moon or Jupiter in Cancer, in Ashlesha, they never produce well. When I've seen planets in Vaisakha, they do not produce well. They have problems. So I will grant that is the case. So when if you take some of these nakshatras, of which, I mean, if you were really serious about this, and I do this in the book, if you were actually really serious about this, what you would do is you would take these 10 words and apply them to each person and see how well they fit. But there's no point in even doing it, because these explanations will have few friends, will be cheerful, virtuous, and have a temper. Well-liked, will earn money by his learning and live in comfort. Those 10 words have nothing to do with the essence of any human being. In the book, I explain, if you look at the life of James Braha, what you have, this is basically, I narrowed it down basically, a horrific childhood with a mentally ill mother, an actor in the theater for 10 years, the pursuit of astrology and the pursuit of moksha for the rest of my life. And we could add, he wrote 7 books. There's not much else that you can boil down my life. You could say, well, his character is this way or that way. You could say that. But Vedic astrology was never psychological and behavioral. It was predictive. So you're not going to predict what my personality is anyway.
Right.
You're going to say a terrible childhood, an actor for 10 years, and then for the rest of his life, he pursued moksha and astrology, and he wrote a bunch of books, and he taught. That's the essence of my life. In my book, the Braha Sutras, I list all of my planets in the different nakshatras that they exist. And guess what? None of them indicate a mother that was mentally ill. None of them indicate an actor. None of them indicate, in fact, regarding astrology and moksha, which is my whole life, if the nakshatras were to work, all of my planets and the ascendant all of my planets and the ascendant, except for one, they're all Rakshasas and humans. There's one Deva. You know what that means? There's no Devas. That means this guy's life is all about money and possessions and worldly things. So there is a reason that the Indians let go of the nakshatras. There were some books here and there that people wrote, but basically they just never used them that way. And then in the West, we started writing books, and here's the thing. One of the things I say in my book, I say, there are those people who will say, well, James, you're not using the nakshatras correctly. It's not about your health. It's not about your spouse. It's not about your career. It's not about your children. They will say that. They'll say it's about your personality or
Right.
your inner behavior and stuff like that. And to that, I say a few things. Number one, it hasn't gotten my character or behavior correct.
Right.
Number two, it's not what Hindu Vedic astrology is about. Number three, if you pick any of those nakshatras and read them to 10 people and say, this is yours, they're going to say, yes, it's me. To the people who, and I'm going to say this, to the people who say, James, you're not using them correctly, they are psychological and behavioral, I'm going to say, well, go and look on the internet. People are now giving astrological readings, not using planets, not using houses, and they're going to use the nakshatras to tell you your health, your career, your number of children. This would be humorous if it wasn't so tragic.
James, I have one question around this nakshatra thing. Uh, for calculation of Vimmshotari mahadasha, which is an important element of timing.
Wait. Can you speak closer? Because I'm having a hard time hearing.
Hello, are you able to listen to me? Yeah. I want to ask you one question around the nakshatra, the use of nakshatra. We use the nakshatra for determination of the Vimmshotari mahadasha. From the moon nakshatra, we calculate the Vimmshotari mahadasha.
Yeah.
So it is one of the important, and we have a lot of chapters on Parashara on Vimmshotari mahadasha, which is a nakshatra based.
Yeah. They are
so
used.
How do you look at that?
They are used. They are used. For that. They are used for that, but you don't say, oh, because the dasha is this, the person's life is going to be this. It tells you the dashas, but that's not what people look. We have been using dashas based on nakshatras for centuries. In the last 20 years, they're saying your sun nakshatra, your Venus nakshatra is in this sign, and therefore your life is like this. That is just nonsense. The other thing I want to say is that to anybody that says, but the nakshatras are fascinating, I will agree 100%. The nakshatras are the deities and what they represent. This is fascinating. What they represent. This one is a wheelbarrow. This one is whatever they are. I mean, I would say mine, but mine is a woman's vulva. I didn't want to say it, but so anyway, they are quite fascinating, but they have nothing to do with what a person's life is going to be. Now, you can be fascinated by the nakshatras in the same way that I am fascinated by movies, but the movies are fiction. I don't pass them off as being accurate. So, that's basically it. And if you get this book, the Braha Sutras, and you start to read it, I spent 20 pages on this. And the interesting thing was that I didn't start, these sutras were mostly a page or two. As I began writing about the nakshatras, it got more and more obvious. It got more, I mean, if you just take it on face value, there's no interpretive material on people from the nakshatras other than 300 words, none of which make any sense. None of which, you couldn't take any of the Brihat Jataka and give it in a reading, and the person says, wow, he knows who I am. It's ridiculous. I mean, so this, plus the fact that Parashara wrote nothing about them, plus the fact that it's mainly in the religious scriptures. Just think about it. Now, here's the thing. If you love nakshatras and you want to use nakshatras, that's your choice. For the people that have read this book already, so many have said, I tried so many times. I've read the nakshatra books. I tried so many times to apply them to myself, to apply them to people. It doesn't work. So for the people who love nakshatras and they're fantastic, and if you can take a nakshatra and predict how many children someone will have and what career they'll do, more power to you. But there's nothing in a nakshatra that's going to tell you which part of the body is going to get sick, how long you're going to live, how many children you're going to have. It's just not there. And astrologers, I've said this over and over, we are so gullible. Somebody sent me something. They said, James, what do you think about this particular statement that I heard on a YouTube? And I said, well, how does it sound to you? Because it was so ridiculous. How does it sound to you? There's no common sense. And she said, well, it didn't work in my chart. As if it matters, as if it really matters whether it works in her chart. That's not what matters. It has to work in lots of charts. So I said, so you mean if that worked in your chart, then you would start using it for everybody? So astrologers, we're all very gullible. And what we need is more skepticism to see what really works and what doesn't. We have to be on guard to be skeptical. When I went to India, the first question I asked Santanam, because I had experienced that solar return charts, Varshapal, didn't work at all. And the first thing he said is they're useless and baseless. You have to be skeptical. I mean, So anyway, the reason that the Nakshatra Sutra became 20 pages was because I just had to go over and over and over and cite as many examples as I possibly could that would let you know that when you do that, you're going astray. I am not an astrologer who cares much about what the ancient sages said. Everybody knows that. I take what they said, and if it works, I use it. But the fact that they said 300 words in an astrology text on 27 nakshatras, and whatever was there was about 2 pages in the religious scriptures, what does it tell you? What does it tell you? So it's up to you. But so I'm speaking to the people who have tried the nakshatras. They realize they don't work. That now you can let it go. You can let that feature go, and you can focus on the real Jyotish, which is the planets and the houses and the yogas and everything else.
Right. I have one more question around this nakshatra thing. We can use this. So I want to know, how do you approach when you look at the chart? Do you want to cover it right now, or do you want to cover the sutras, or would you like to share some of the sutras from the book? Couple of sutras from the book?
Well, I mean, I'll answer your question about nakshatras quite simply. I don't use them. I use them
right.
I use them only when I see a planet in Vaisakha or in Ashlesha. And then I know it's going to have problems. Now, I got this. How did I learn about Vaisakha and Ashlesha if my teachers told me nothing? A friend of mine wrote a book on nakshatras, and I said, tell me the 5 best and the 5 worst. Out of the 5 best and the 5 worst, I didn't really find much that was so good about the 5 good ones. And I found 2 of them that were consistently difficult, Vaisakha and Ashlesha. So I don't really use them. If my teachers, if Santanam did not use them, and Padya did not use them, I went around India for 10 months. It's not that I didn't see astrologers. I saw astrologers. And my skepticism said, these people, I'm not going to learn from this person. They had some, I mean, one guy told me, you're going to write some books, and he was accurate. But the reading as a whole it wasn't enough. So I'm very picky about astrologers. And so this is something that this is also something that beginners, because beginners don't know. They don't study a lot. They go on YouTube's. They don't know that most of the astrologers in India, they're using nakshatras for rituals. They're using them for compatibility. They are not. Maybe they are. They are now because of what's the internet has brought up. But up until now, they use them for Vimmshotari dasha. For calculating the dashas, you must have nakshatras. But they were never using them for people's lives in terms of their natal application. They never used them. So this is a very recent invention. So I could talk about some sutras. It's funny because I have spoken because as I was writing them, I would be doing videos. They would call me up, and I'd say, all right, I write in the morning, I'll write in the afternoon, and I'll do a video in the morning. So most of what I say is you may have already heard, but that's okay. So regarding Rahu is a malefic. And there is a misconception that Rahu is like Saturn, and Ketu is like Mars, because this was in textbooks. They would say Rahu is like Saturn, Ketu is like Mars. This is a great statement, because Rahu is 18 years and Saturn's 19 years in the dasha. Ketu is 7 years, and Mars is 7 years. So they're similar. They're not similar at all. Mars and Ketu, you could say, is similar because they both create havoc. They create big problems. Rahu does not create the kind of problems that Saturn does. If Rahu is badly placed in the 2nd house or 8th house, it's terrible. That's the worst placement for Rahu or Ketu. It ruins family life. It's unhappy. That's true. That's bad there. But Rahu itself in a house brings insatiable cravings and desires for power. In the 11th house, cravings for wealth, big wealth. In the 1st house, cravings for recognition. In the 5th house could be powerful children. Yes, there will also be some negatives, but it's not like Saturn. Saturn, right off the bat, hurts the house. But here's where it becomes critical. If Venus is conjunct Saturn or Mars, you got big problems with Venus. If Venus is with Rahu, it might get bruised. It might get bruised. It will not get devastated. No way. Now, if Venus is aspected by Rahu plus another malefic, then you got serious problems. Okay? Rahu alone will be a mild bruise. But if you get another malefic in there, you got big trouble. Okay? Secondly, Rahu in the Western horoscope is known as the North Node, and the North Node tells you where you are going toward. So my North Node's in the 10th house, career. So from an early age, I was going toward career. If North Node's in the marriage house, the person's going toward marriage, right? So if you have a planet next to the North Node, whatever planet it is, Sun, Moon, Venus, Jupiter, becomes very easy to access. So if Jupiter's near the North Node, Jupiter could get a little bit bruised. But if that person with Rahu and Jupiter close, within 5-10 degrees, wants to do something with religion and spirituality and astrology, it becomes very easy. If a person has Rahu with Venus, it becomes very easy to access Venus because they're going toward the North Node anyway. Okay? So that's really important to understand. Rahu also, these are all in my book, by the way. Rahu also is affected by planets way more than other planets. If Saturn is in the 7th house aspected by Jupiter or Venus, it will help the Saturn not cause too much trouble. If Saturn's in the marriage house, it's not good for marriage. But if it's aspected by Jupiter or Venus, it'll lessen the trouble. If Rahu is in the 7th house, aspected tightly by Jupiter or Venus, the marriage partner is going to be extremely talented, powerful, successful. Rahu is affected more by other planets. If Saturn is in the money house, aspected by Venus, it's not going to give huge wealth. It's going to lessen some of the Saturn difficulty. I mean, it's possible. Look, if Saturn's exalted in Libra, aspected tightly by Venus, it might be big wealth. But in general, if Saturn's in some house, Capricorn, Virgo, Leo, in the 2nd, it hurts money, and you have one benefic aspecting that Saturn, it'll be less harm. Take that same Rahu, put it in the house of money, have it aspected by Jupiter or Venus. Now what you get is cravings and desires for worldly power in the house of money, well aspected, and then the money becomes huge. Another thing that is all throughout the book is there is a paradox when you're studying astrology. There's a paradox. There's a lot of paradoxes. One paradox is this. You see a horoscope. The person has, let's say, 4 children or something in the horoscope. But the person has none, right? So then the problem is you have to figure out what is in the horoscope that is causing this, to not have the children that appear to be there, or the person's supposed to have a successful career, but they don't. And you're trying to figure out what's happening. Astrologically, okay? It might be that Saturn is devastating the chart and therefore hurts the career. It could be anything. Your job on one hand is to say, what's in the horoscope making this problem for me that I can't analyze it right? And you have to dig and think and contemplate for 3 days after that reading. You're thinking, what the hell happened, right? And that's how you learn. Now, here's the paradox. Not everything is going to show up in the horoscope. So you have the 50 million people that died in World War II. Their deaths are not going to show in the horoscope. So the point is this. In the beginning days, you're trying to find, why did I go wrong? What's in the horoscope? And it's not there. It just isn't there. For whatever reason, it's not there. But in the beginning days, you said, well, it has to be something. And so you grab onto something and say, it must be this. This must be the reason. And then you get stupid answers. I remember the one I loved the best was somebody had a car accident, asked the astrologer why. The astrologer couldn't see why. And they said, well, what color was the car? They said, blue. Well, no wonder you had an accident. You got the color blue, which is Saturn, and you had the accident. This is total nonsense. So, in astrology, you have to learn every meaning of every planet and every house, and you have to be picky, and you have to be, very picky with your words, and you have to do that. But you also have to think. You have to, if you want to be a good astrologer, you have to be a thinker. And you get off, somebody was commenting that they read the book and they felt so good because I said it happens to me. It still happens to me after 40 years. Something goes wrong in the reading. I say this and it turns out something else. And then after the reading, 20 minutes later, I say, oh, geez, I missed that. I missed that one feature, But it's the thought process, and you have to be able to tell. You can't just make something up for why the client had something you didn't see. It might be there, it might not. It's too vast a field to expect everything to be in the horoscope. And then the Bhava chart. there's too many people that don't know about the Bhava chart. So I have a 2-degree Taurus ascendant, and I have the sun 5 signs away from the sun. My ascendant's Taurus. My sun is in 29 Virgo, but the ascendant is 2 Taurus. So the sun looks like it's in the 5th house. But with a 2-degree ascendant and the sun in 29 degrees, it's going to be the 5th house and the 6th house. And when I was with Santanam, he never explained to me the Bhava chart. He didn't explain it. So one day we're looking at a chart and he says, oh, look, Mars and Saturn are in the 9th house. This person's going to have terrible experiences in a bad sign. It was Mars and Saturn in like Aries, or Saturn in Aries, something really bad. And he said, oh, terrible relationships with gurus, etc. The next week, we're looking at the same chart. And he said, oh, look, Mars and Saturn's fallen in the 8th house. This person's going to have an early death. I said, but Saturn's in the 9th house. He said, still. I said, but it's in the 9th house. He said, still. He just didn't bother to explain that because of the Bhava chart, Saturn was on the edge, falling.
On the cusp.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be on the cusp. It can be if the ascendant's 29 degrees and a planet is 6 degrees, that's not in the same house. It's in both. It's in both. If the ascendant is 28 Libra and Venus is in 5 degrees Libra, Venus is in the 1st and the 12th. And if you don't know that, you'll never do this well. And if you don't know how to use the Bhava chart, and it's explained completely fully in the Braha Sutras, you should never try to rectify a horoscope if you don't know the Bhava chart. You can rectify it just to getting the right ascendant. If the person's ascendant is 10, 15, 20 degrees, you can do it. But if the person's ascendant is 20, 25, or 5 or 6 degrees, you're not going to rectify that ascendant if you don't know, because planets will fall in both houses. So if you have any questions, I've said.
I have a lot of questions.
Oh, wait.
A lot of questions.
So make sure I said. Yeah, I think I said this in the beginning. So they can get this book, the Braha Sutras, the Indians can get it at Google Play any day now. I just gave it to them today. And
Okay. Let me just check. Let me share the links with.
Not the chart. You're not going to do the charts right now, are you?
Yeah, we can do that if you
No.
want.
I think this is long enough for one.
Yes. Okay.
Otherwise, I'll have trouble. Because I haven't.
So we have some questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. So can you just briefly tell me about? Let me just check into the comment box if you have any questions. Like, I want to know what are the things you look into the chart. Can you just tell me quickly? As in, if somebody is serious into astrology, is an astrologer, and wants to, he's on his journey to, readings.
Come closer to the microphone.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you that what are the things you look for when you look into the chart that will help the astrologers who are, listening to this?
Well, that's what the whole book is about. I mean,
right.
Every chart is different.
Yes.
Every chart is different.
Right.
So when my eyes go to a horoscope, my eyes cannot miss if there's a lot of planets in one house. I can't miss it. It's obvious. It jumps out. I immediately look at the ascendant degree.
Okay.
If the ascendant degree is 1 degree or 29 degrees, I look at the birth time. Is it 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, or is it 3:43, 5:22? At least they're looking. So then, if the ascendant is that close, where 2 or 3 minutes is going to change the birth time, I have to decide whether I can read the chart or not. Then it happened today. The lady's got 29.5 degree ascendant. Her birth time is 10:45. I shoot an email. 10:45, is that an approximation or not? She says, well, we really don't know. It could be. So I said, did you have trouble with your mother? Saturn in the 4th house. Or do you work super hard? Saturn in the 3rd house. She says, no, I don't work particularly hard. And yes, I had trouble with the mother. So now I know that's right. All right. So the first thing I look at is the ascendant degree. Ascendant degree. Because I want to do, and then once I see the ascendant degree, if it's very early or very late, I immediately look at the degrees of the planets. So if the ascendant is 2 degrees and there's planets in 20, 23, 25, 28, I know those planets are in 2 houses. If the ascendant's 28 degrees and I see planets in 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, I know those planets are in 2 houses. That's right off the bat. Okay? Then I look at the whole chart to see what I see. But what I'm going to address in the beginning, when I get the client there, the first thing I'm going to do is I say I'm going to give a little overview. And in the overview, I spend 5 or 10 minutes saying all the things that are obvious, that I know are 90% likely to be accurate. Why? Because in the first 7, 8 minutes, the client goes, oh my God, this guy's accurate, right? So if the planet of art, if Venus is in the house of art and the 10th house ruler in the Dasamsha is in the house of the arts, I'm going to mention right at the start, this lifetime is very, very artistic. If I see Saturn in the 5th house, I'm going to say children later in life, or you don't want children. I'm going to say the obvious things so that they know that I know what I'm doing. Then they can trust. And then once I'm done giving an overview, then I say the foundation of the horoscope is the ascendant, the moon, and the sun. I've got 2 sutras in this book about this, about the foundation. The foundation of the chart is everything. So look, I have a great 9th house. When I want knowledge, I get it. When I want good higher knowledge, I get it. And I'm not gullible with it. I'm not as gullible because I got a great 9th house. And I have a great 10th house, so I have great career. The rest of the chart is a nightmare. Pretty much the rest of the chart's a nightmare. So if I get a reading from somebody and they say, oh, you're going to have a big career. Oh, you're going to get a lot of higher knowledge and metaphysical and spiritual, etc. That's great. But if that person wants to know who James Braha is, they're going to have to see the moon in the 12th house, which is painful emotionally. It's a difficult placement. They're going to have to see the ascendant ruler 2 degrees away from Ketu, which is very shy and introspective. Childhood was a disaster with moon in the 12th, with Venus right next to Ketu, with Venus right next to Mars, which is the 12th house ruler. So the ascendant ruler of Venus next to Ketu is shy and introspective. Next to the 12th house ruler is shy and introspective. But Mars is also a planet of assertiveness. So people, when they see my YouTubes, they don't know how shy, and it was really, the first 30 years were just a disaster. But if I was going to get a reading, I would want the astrologer to know who I am. There's who I am. There's who I am, and there's what I'm going to do. And also, who am I? With the moon in the 12th, the ascendant ruler next to Ketu, the ascendant ruler next to the 12th ruler, who I am as a spiritual metaphysician. That's who I am. Then there's what I do. I have troubles in childhood. And so, now the thing is, you want to be a good astrologer, you want both. But in the very beginning of the reading, I want them to know whether or not I know what's going to happen to them and what their life is about. I want them to know that I know them. So if their ascendant ruler is strong and Jupiter or moon aspect the ascendant, and the ascendant is strong, the confidence is strong. If the moon is in a good house, aspected well and bright, without malefics, their confidence is strong. If the sun is powerful, well aspected, then they have confidence. Even if they don't have a good career, even if they don't have talents, their life is easier than mine because they go through life, right? I had to, I live on Mount Soma where there's a temple, right? I told my wife, if I have time, I'm going to go to the temple this morning and get a blessing from the priest because I'm going to talk about nakshatras and I'm going to say stuff that I know people may not like. And I didn't have time to do that. But why is that? Because, somebody else would say, I don't care. I'm going to say what I think and blah, blah, blah. I'm not like that. I'm thinking, I don't want to offend anybody. Anyway, so that's right. So you want to know who the person is. You got to get the ascendant, the moon, and the sun. So there's like 10 different factors there. What planets aspect the ascendant? What planets aspect the ascendant ruler? What house the ascendant ruler is in? Is it a good house, 5 or 9, or is it 6, 8, or 12? Where is the moon? Is it bright? Is it well placed, or is it badly placed? Is it badly aspect? So I want to know the foundation of the person, so I know their experience. And then I also, now look, that's not what I started with. When I started astrology, I wanted to know what's going to happen to them. I already had the Western chart psychology and such from the Western, but I want to know what's the career. Once I see something that looks like the career, so the career in the natal chart can be from the 10th house. Where's the 10th ruler? What's in the 10th? What's aspecting the 10th? But it could also be the 6th house is just so powerful it overpowers the chart that it's going to be a medical person because the 6th house is so strong. I don't care what the 10th house is doing. If the 10th house dominates the chart. On the other hand, there could be some strong houses, but the career could be indicated really strongly to be religious. As soon as I get that part of the career, I go immediately to the 10th house of the career chart, the dasamsha, and I say, does it match? Does it match? Now, when I get to the dasamsha, I got to look at the degrees of the ascendant. The dasamsha changes 3, 6, 9, 12. So if the ascendant is anywhere near 1 or 2.5, 3, or
you need to check the timings.
Is it 16 degrees or 18.5 degrees? You gotta analyze whether the chart is working, whether the dasamsha might be different. If the ascendant's in the middle of those 3 degrees, I don't worry about it, and I look to see. Now, sometimes you get a chart where the career is the arts and the dasamsha career is medical, and then you throw up your hands and it's a wild card. But if you can find more, sometimes it means the person wants to be an artist and they do some art, but to make a living, they do medical because art is difficult. Sometimes they have a spiritual career, but they can't make a living, so they do something else that is where they can make a living. It just depends. But what you have to, for 40 years, doesn't happen anymore because I'm so well known. But in the first 10, 15 years, people they didn't want to spend their money unless they were going to get something. And they would say to me, what will you be able to tell me? And I would say, I don't know. I do not know what I will see until I see the chart. If I see the chart and the career is confusing, I'll tell them the career is confusing. If it's confusing, right? If it's not clear whether they have children or not, I have to tell them it's not clear. Also, throughout this book, and boy, if you don't get this when reading this book, something is wrong. You've got to learn the words, I don't know. It's not clear from the horoscope. It is not clear. I don't know. I can tell you all this other stuff that I can't tell you.
Right.
You have to be able to say that. In the early days, people think they're supposed to know everything. You're never going to know everything.
Right. Amazing. Yes, we have one more question. Self-mode SM is asking, what makes Ashlesha and Vishakha different from other nakshatras that Mr. Braha looks at, or that makes the other nakshatra insignificant?
I don't look at nakshatras. My teachers told me it's a lost system. I told you there's no nakshatra descriptions in Parashara. There's only one book, that astrological text, that lists nakshatras, and what they tell you is basically garbage. It's 10 words for each nakshatra, none of which have anything to do with a person's life. So I don't look at nakshatras. However, I didn't just take the word of my teachers. They told me, no, they're garbage, leave them alone, they don't work, they're from a lost age. But I don't listen to anybody. Okay, I listen if what they said is true. So when the books started to come out on the nakshatras, I looked at the books, I read them, I couldn't make heads or tails of them, because every time I read one, I could read it to anybody. None of them said the number of children. None of them said the career. None of them said the health problems. None of them said anything significant. However, I'm always open-minded. When this author told me these are the best and these are the worst, I analyzed them. I investigated them. I found nothing. There was one called Revati, was supposed to be fantastic. There was one called Anuradha, was supposed to be fantastic. I didn't find anything good about it. But one thing I noticed was that Ashlesha was listed as one of the bad ones. I said, now that's interesting, because for 5-7 years, every time somebody comes with a moon in Ashlesha and the moon dasha comes, it's terrible. Every time someone comes with Jupiter in Ashlesha in Cancer, we're talking about moon in its own sign and Jupiter exalted in Cancer in Ashlesha, and they were terrible. I said, what is going on? There were no aspects from Mars, Saturn, Sun, Rahu, Ketu onto Moon or Jupiter, and the dashas were bad. So that tells me that it looks to me, we're not talking about one horoscope. You don't draw conclusions from your own horoscope only. You don't draw conclusions because one guy had something. It has to work over and over. Over 5 years had gone by that every time I saw a moon or Jupiter in Cancer, I would go, uh-oh, because I'm going to tell them how good it is. And sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they won't. Because I didn't know about the nakshatras. So the ones that had moon and Jupiter in Ashlesha were bad, and the ones that had moon and Jupiter in Cancer not in Ashlesha, those were good. But I didn't know, I wasn't looking. So I saw that was accurate. And then when it came to Vaisakha, it was one of the ones that I looked at out of the 10 that he gave me. And Vaisakha was brutal. I would find Mars in its own sign, Scorpio, in Vaisakha, in the first 3 degrees of Scorpio, and they would have blood problems and muscle problems with Mars in the first house in its own sign, and they're having health problems from Mars because it's in Vaisakha. And I've seen it with planets in late Libra. They don't work well. You may have Jupiter in late Libra and think that house is going to be great, and it has problems. Or the Jupiter dasha has problems because could be in the 9th house in a good house, in a good sign, but it's in Vaisakha, and now suddenly you got problems. But I really, I've had it with nakshatras. I've never seen, and I've had people call me, James, I just read about your nakshatra. God, it's so accurate. And I just, not for me.
Okay. So yes, we have one more question. VL, you mentioned Pluto in tropical majors is in Capricorn and soon moving to Capricorn sidereally.
No, not soon. No, 10 years from now.
10 years from now. Yeah.
Pluto just got into Capricorn 2020. About 10 years from now, I believe it's 10. It's in the book. I think it's about 10 years from now. It's going to go into the sidereally. Okay. With that in mind, do you treat the rest of the planets in the same way? I don't know what they mean. I don't. When I'm looking at a horoscope, that's mundane astrology. That's not someone's horoscope. That's mundane. I do not look at Sun, Moon, Venus. I look at Jupiter. Like This book was supposed to be out months ago. I finished this book in October. It is April, right? About 2 months ago, I said, there were all kinds of delays and things I had to do. And finally I said, Jupiter doesn't want this book. Jupiter does not want this book coming out while it's in Capricorn, Aquarius. Jupiter wants this book coming out when it enters Pisces. I have no idea. Well, I do have an idea why. I mean, I hadn't gone and given an astrological conference for 10, 15 years. When Jupiter went into Sagittarius, I hadn't done a conference in 10 years. I really didn't want to do it. But somebody sent some emails. This guy said that this lady said, everybody wants you to come to the conference. And then she says, some guy was there. Oh, she got in the car after the conference and she was driving with the cab driver and he was taking her to the airport. And she said, I was at the conference. He said, yeah, I'm not going to the conference again until James Braha goes. And I heard that and I said, oh God, I don't want to be that guy. All right, I'm going to go. I hadn't gone in 10 years. But Jupiter was in Sagittarius. It was a great time to do it, right? I didn't do it on purpose, but that's what happened. It's because of that conference that I had all these notes to make this book, and now the book wants to come out when Jupiter's in Pisces. All right. So
Amazing.
I look at Jupiter going into signs. I look at Saturn going into signs, and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Uranus went into Taurus, the sign of money, the year that Bitcoin went from 2,000 to 20,000. This is important. So this was, if you go back and look, I forget the year, it's in the book. I thought when Uranus went into Taurus, the sign of money, Uranus is weird and strange and breaks things up. Taurus is money. So I said when Uranus goes into Taurus, the world would go on the gold standard and get rid of this paper money garbage. No, I was wrong. Instead, it brought Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what the price did. What matters was that when it did that, the whole world took notice and they learned about Bitcoin. Now, it went from 20,000 back down to 5,000, whatever. Now it's 50,000. Now, in 2024, Uranus is going to enter Taurus in the sign, in the sidereal zodiac. This is going to be bigger. When Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, the financial system collapsed. When Pluto entered Capricorn in 2020, the world went crazy with right-wing autocratic government, assault on the democracy. They were both Pluto and Capricorn. One was tropical, the other sidereal. So in 2024, when Uranus goes into Taurus again, but this time in the sidereal, you are likely to see an explosion of Bitcoin, or it could be gold. Who knows? But you're going to see something go on at that time. Now, if you do follow Bitcoin, coincidentally, Bitcoin cuts in half in 2024. I don't know how many of your people know what halving is, but halving, meaning cut in half, Bitcoin only has a number. Let's just say a guess, 25 million Bitcoins. And then once the 25 million are done, it's over. They don't print anymore. So when they set up Bitcoin, they made it so that when it got near the end, when it got to 15 million, they suddenly made it twice as hard to mine the Bitcoin. So it slows the process. So what happened 6-8 months ago when it exploded to 40, 50,000, that was a result of the cutting in half in 2020 or 2019. Now it's going to cut it in half again in 2024 at the same time that Uranus goes into Taurus. You're going to see some action, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
This Dana Elmore is asking, as a new upcoming astrologer, will this book help me starting out tremendously on Vedic astrology, on Vedic knowledge? Thanks.
The astrology, yeah, not Vedic knowledge, but Vedic astrology. So when I did the conference, the title of the lecture was "What I Wish I Knew 40 Years Ago." That was the title of the workshop. That became the Braha Sutras. That's what it
Oh,
became. This is what I wish I knew 40 years ago. This is why, if you look on my Facebook page, the guy says, James, you just short-circuited years of my learning. He said so many things I'm trying to struggle. They're all answered. These are the things I wish I knew. This is, if you look at the books that are written on astrology and things like that, most books tend to get written when the person's 30, 35, when their desires are big, and when they want to get known, so they write the books. I mean, that's why I updated. I was dying to update my first book, The Ancient Hindu Astrology. It was written in 1985. So in the year 2020, I took an entire year. This was a real difficult decision. I said, who the hell's going to buy a revised book? But I know the new people will buy it, right? But I said, I'm going to spend a year revising this book. And I'm glad I did. So now when I die, I can sleep well knowing that the real best knowledge that I could give is out there.
that was your first book?
This was written in 1985. I had come back from India, and I said, this is ridiculous. I don't know why this body of knowledge has not been promoted in the West. And I put it out there, and it was immediately embraced. I got letters from all over the world saying, I can't believe this. I finally know how to do it. And I have 4 scrapbooks. I don't know if you can, there's like 4 or 5 scrapbooks on the top shelf up there. There they are.
Oh, yes.
There's like 6 or 7 scrapbooks. And out of all those scrapbooks, there's one letter that is the most meaningful to me. And it came from Robert Hand, who is still the world's foremost Western astrological scholar. And he said, I think you may have written something of a masterpiece here, in the sense that people can actually now, and he had gone to India to study. He had gone. He's a great scholar, still my idol, still to this day.
Right. Amazing. Now, final question. We'll take one question. And do you have, it's because questions are not going to stop. So do you have any final words to conclude this? Because it was, I'm going to listen to this video again when we'll conclude this session. I'm going to, because there are a lot of points you discussed in this session. So do you have any final suggestion for the people who are on the path of Vedic astrology, learning on this? Your words are valuable.
You have to learn the meanings properly. When I came back from India, I said, you have trouble with your hearing? She said, yes. And I said, it's in the right ear. She said, my God, the doctors think it's my left ear, and I know it's the right ear. So if you learn the meanings, and those are not in the Braha Sutras, those are in the original book, but you got to get your revised and expanded edition. But even in 1985, it was in that book, what the ears are. So you have to study. There's a word here we say the person's anal. They're anal, retentive. They're picky. But you have to be picky to learn properly.
Skeptical.
This is the difficulty with thinking you're going to learn this on the internet. You're not. You're going to get 27 different opinions, and you're going to get all sorts of nonsense. And you'll get some good stuff too, but you won't know what's the good and what's the nonsense. So you have to learn very well. And then you have to be willing to think. This may sound easy. It's not. People are lazy. I'm lazy. I can, if it's a subject like mechanical, technical, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to think deeply. I'm going to get someone else to do it. I don't care what I got to pay. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But astrology and spiritual knowledge, moksha, enlightenment, That's all my life's ever been about. And when I want that stuff, I'm going to think and think and think until I get the answer. It took me 30 years, 35 years to figure out why Mercury is connected to the mother. It took me 30 years to find out that Mercury, Jupiter conjunct is no good. But you have to be willing to think, and that's what it's about. And most people, in case you haven't noticed, they don't want to think. They're lazy and they don't want to think. And if you're lazy in the thought process, then this is not the field for you. And the thing is, I'm going to say it again. Einstein said the reason he could get what he got was because he was comfortable in confusion.
Oh.
When people get confused, they run away. They run to a teacher. No, I'm confused. I'm going to figure it out. A month before the book was finished, or 2 months before the book was finished, I said, "Oh God, I have this issue. Do dashas throw aspects?" This is something 39 years I couldn't get the answer to. Now, I never used them. I never said you're in Saturn dasha, Saturn's going to hurt the opposite house. I never said that, okay? But I couldn't state for certain that was not the case. I couldn't say it definitely doesn't. I said in my practice, I don't think it does. But I've seen enough times when a dasha planet seems to aspect a house in its dasha. Enough to make me wonder for 39 years. But during the writing of this book, I said, I'm going to figure this out. As confusing and difficult an issue, I said, I'm going to figure it out. And I started to think about it, And then suddenly a thought came. All planets aspect their opposite house. So if you have exalted Saturn, it hurts the Aries house. If you have fallen Venus in Virgo, it helps the Pisces house. Always, because they throw aspects. This was the first day I was with Santanam. He said, come, let's look at Ram's chart, God. The chart is perfect.
Right.
Exalted, but Sun's exalted and Saturn's exalted. So Saturn hits that Sun in Aries and the father dies early.
Oh.
Okay. So all planets aspect their opposite house. We know this natally.
Right.
If dasha planets threw aspects, a fallen planet would be terrible in the dasha for that. Let's say it's Mercury in Pisces. Mercury's in Pisces, 17 bad years. But you would say to the person, but that other house, Virgo, is going to flourish. Because you're in the dasha, it's going to throw the aspect. But that never happens. That does not happen. And that's when I knew, oh, okay, so they definitely do not throw aspects. So the point here is, it's good that you learn that piece of information. But the more important part is that you have to figure it out. The teacher's not going to figure it out for you. You can ask for help. But really, I don't trust anybody. I told you, I don't trust my gurus. If I disagree with them, I disagree with them.
Right.
I respect them. I take their knowledge. And when Paddy would say, you take it from me, I have marked this, I know damn well that's going to be accurate. But when it comes to, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to learn everything as specifically as you can. And then you have to use your brain. And if you don't like using your brain, this is not the field for you. And let me tell you something. I left astrology for 5 years because I was so burned out by how I was writing and doing charts. And you know what I said when it was over? I said, I will never do this again. It's too mental. It's too intellectual and mental. However, after Sailor Bob came, we had moksha, non-duality. So much of the suffering and the attachment, they just fell away. And so now my brain is more, free, and it makes it easier. It makes it a lot easier, so it doesn't bother me. But it's a very mental profession.
Yes.
You have to be willing to think.
Yes. VL is saying this was excellent. Thank you. Lot of clarity, perfect alignment. I pulled your book off my shelf today and ordered your astrologers this morning. Now Graha Sutras. Thanks a lot.
Braha Sutra.
Braha Sutra.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Yes, brother. James Roth, thanks a lot for sharing your valuable, you know, for 40 years of experience. You're sharing this insights with us. Thank you for being on this channel.
Well,
You're good.
you know what the dedication to this book is? I'll
Hmm.
read it to you. And I could not have said this 15 years ago, but I say it now. Wait a minute, where is it? To the lights above for a wonderful destiny, and to students of Jyotish who give meaning to my life, what a blessing. So this book is to you
Student.
for giving
Yes.
meaning to my life.
Yes.
What would I be without the students of Jyotish? Nothing.
Right. Yes.
I have to.
Yes. Yes. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Yes. Namaste.
That's a long